Welcome back. We're here at the Egyptian commentary on the Exodus. Part 7, the Passover stars, and all about what I would call how we can see in the night sky when Passover is coming and how is it connected to the Egyptian view, the Egyptian mythology, and the same thing or the same pattern that I mentioned in the other parts, as in the last part about the Levin. And let's start. So the star constellation of Passover. So you might know that in ancient Egypt, star constellations and stars were very important in mythology, in religion, in iconography, and so on. And before I start with offering my theory, how it is connected to Pesach, on which constellation and so on, I want to introduce to all of you who don't know them, two more or less known Egyptian gods or concepts. As I usually think that our conception of the Egyptian god as some person, some figure, some animal is not quite correct. It's usually a concept that can have different forms, different symbols, and so on. So these two here, okay, and we are not quite sure if we pronounce it correctly, because you see here the SPDT. This is more or less what we think the consonants of this name were, and we usually call it Sobdet or something like that. So this is a goddess. You see here already in the hieroglyphic name, the star. It's a goddess connected to the stars. And another very ancient god, both of them are very ancient. They appear already 6,000 years ago in the pyramid text. So we have here Sa. And you see these three little things, and the star and the seated god. And usually, so usually they appear together. They are connected. There are some kind of consorts or partnership. And I'm showing here a ceiling painting from the temple in Dendra. That is very much connected to star constellations and stars and so on. And you might see here that they have this, or you might see here this name, this hieroglyphic name, these three little things, which is actually the same goddess here. This is the representation of Sa. And here you have the representation of Sobdet. By the way, this ceiling painting in Dendra is dated around the 4th century BCE, which is not so long ago in Egyptian terms, but and things change quite a lot through the millenniums of Egyptian culture and belief and so on. But you see also here in the lower right part an older picture where you see also Sa with this three little things above his head. So I continue. So here you have also another few other pictures representation of Sa, and you see here in this picture, for example, the upper one, two big stars on the left and right of him, and you see in the lower picture three stars on his bark, on his little ship that he's traveling with. So, and you see all the time that he's looking back, right? He's looking left. And if you know a star constellation, with 3 stars in a row, you might think about Orion. Actually, I would say the most significant or most recognizable star constellation that you can see here. See the 3 stars. You see here this little other 3 stars. And what you see here on the left is Sirius. Okay, and for the ancient Egyptians, Orion, which is a Greek term and is a bit different constellation, Orion was called Sa, and this bright star that we call Sirius from the Greek was called Sopdet. And you see they're connected, they're close to each other, and this is what this is like a suggestion from me, which I will later base on other people, on academics that did something similar, but I'm using here Osiris and Isis, which are not Sa and Sopdet. I will connect them very soon, but you can see that you can imagine with the Sa composition that there is like a headband or something and a beard, a god, a divine beard, and you see this looking backwards towards the star of Sopdet. Okay, this is more or less, this iconography connection is a bit a theory of me. I will show it more detailed. But before that, we go deeper into Sopdet and Sa. So as I already showed you here, I connect this to Isis and Osiris, not because it's my idea, because the Egyptians connected them quite millennials ago to Isis and Osiris, and we have very often these situations where Egyptian gods or concepts merge into each other because the concepts are very close, and through the millennials they get combined, they get different how you say, different specific notes, or they adopt titles from one of each other and so on. So if we look at Sopdet, it can also be called Isis. They're not always the same. They're sometimes let's say interchangeable, and sometimes they're separate, but you can quite safely connect Isis and Sopdet, which is also then in the more Greek universe, Sotis, the dog star, and Sotis and Sirius, also called the morning star, which is a very important star in many cultures, not only in the Egyptian. You can think about the Christian story, which seemingly was referring to the same star that announced the birth of Jesus. And on the other side, Sa, you see that he's connected to Osiris, or actually also Osiris is a quite Greek pronunciation. We would see maybe Osir or Wazir or Osir or something like this. Also to Sopdu, which is also very old sky god, which was connected to both of them, so Sopdet and Sa, and had also familial connection to them. But actually Sa is quite clearly recognized in ancient Egypt with the constellation of Orion, but I'm not meaning the Greek modern Orion, with these stars that I just showed you. So then they also have other associations, more detailed one, and Sopdet is connected with the child, with bearing a child, or uniting with Pharaoh or with Osiris and getting a child. This child can sometimes be the morning, the planet Venus, like the morning Venus, or also Horus, which I would also connect to the morning sun. And on the other side, Sa is also called in the pyramid texts, like very ancient texts, 5 to 6,000 years ago, the father of the gods, and another epithet name for him is the hidden one. Sopdet is also very closely connected to the Nile flood, which I will explain, and the New Year. She's also called the Lady of the New Year. And she comes together with Sa or Osiris, and of course Osiris comes together with Isis or Sopdet. So to just base these things that I just mentioned, that you don't think I make them up, I'm giving you some articles, but most of them are quite like Egyptology, like common knowledge, but I just, some points here more stressed. So we have here Sa, which they write in brackets Orion, and they say he is associated with Osiris, and yeah, he is together with Sopdet, or the union, the union with Sopdet, they get pregnant and give birth to the morning star. And I'm stressing here more the morning than the star, because in my view also the morning sun falls in this category. As you see here, she's following, what is she? Sopdet, like, okay, she's following Sa or Osiris in the sky, and she also protects him, as if protecting him from the big enemy Set, which is also connected to the northern sky. So if you remember also from the Leven story, Set is back here. Set is the enemy. And we are back to our story. Set, Osiris, Isis, and Horus, the morning, okay? So another source repeats many of the things, but tells us here that Sopdet or Sotis or Osiris was very important, and it was hidden for many, many days in the year. And then suddenly it appeared again, which I will explain a bit, in the morning, which is called the Heliacal rising in summer. And yeah, I just will, so I will mention this. I will explain more this Heliacal rising, but actually what the ancient Egyptians had, they had a new year, and it was defined or characterized by two important things at least that happened. One was this spectacle in the sky, this special rising of Sirius, okay, and the second one was the Nile inundation, the Nile flood, and they are more or less came together, and seemingly in the most calibrated times of the Egyptian calendar, or when they started or defined these things, they were very much aligned on the same day. Okay, then each with the years you get differences between the things and so on, but actually we think there was a time where actually both things happened at the same day, when this rising, this heliacal rising of Sirius, Sotis or Sopdet occurred, and when the Nile flood started again. Both are annual events, both are the markers of the Egyptian New Year, which was in July. As you know, the Nile flood wasn't summer because it was connected to the rains very much down south in Ethiopia and further south. And so this Sopdet was also connected to this renewal, the new year and the new life, which was of course also connected to Osiris, to the whole story of him, which I also last time with the Leven very much mentioned, the whole resurrection, the regrowth of the agriculture, of the plants and so on. Okay, so she was the bringer of the new year and the Nile flood. Completely right. And for that reason, she was also associated with Sa and Osiris, who symbolized this annual renewal. And in the pyramid text, she is also described as having united with the king Osiris to give birth to the morning star Venus, which I already mentioned. And she was also connected to the netherworld, which I will explain shortly, and was also identified with Isis. Okay, so we have also this Isis-Sotis. Now, what's the issue with the netherworld? In ancient, or what's also the issue with this Sar and the netherworld in the pyramid text and so on? The Egyptians believed that actually the Duat is not so much like underworld, it's like the next world. It's very much connected to the stars, because actually the great souls, usually at the first periods, only the pharaohs would become stars. Okay, they would have this transitions process from body to like a soul process of the transformation of the souls, and in the best circumstances he would become very special soul. He would become a star in the horizon, and in later times they even gave actually star groups that were named and associated with certain pharaohs and so on. So the Sa was like the star group of Orion, but it actually was like symbolizing the next world, or the world of the next life for the pharaohs and on the sky, and Sopdet was also connected to this. Okay, so we have this whole issue with the netherworld through the stars. And in this later, much later story of Amduat, like how actually the story of how the deceased pharaoh can become a star, what he has to do, and he goes through all the hours of the night and so on. So this is connected to the stars. Okay, so this I mentioned. Oh no, this I did not mention here. Okay, so so beginning of the year again, annual flood. Okay, heliacal rising. One more moment, I will explain it. And also here you see child Horus is also connected. Okay, so I also mentioned this new year because, as you might know, in the Passover story, Passover is actually defined as the new year for the Israelites. Okay, today in Jewish Torah rules and custom and so on, we have several new years for different things, but actually in the Torah it says that this Passover, the months of Passover would be the first months, and we should count the years from this months. So actually, if we connect, we can also connect here the Passover story to this Osiris-Isis story, that since both are starting the year, both are very important events that start the year, and it's expected that also in Judaism we would have a new year beginning that is symbolized, that is somehow, it can be seen in the night sky, because it's very, we cannot count the moons and so on. We need something that shows us more correctly or exactly in the stars when the new year starts. Okay, so I want to now refer to the heliacal rising. What do they mean by that? This Sirius star, this Isis, Sopdet or Sotis or Dog Star or Morning Star or Cirrus Star, has a period in the year where it does not appear at the night sky. It might appear during the day, but we don't see it. Okay, we have, when the sun is out, we don't see the stars. And we also don't see the stars if during the night they are not on our side of the Earth where we can see them. So there are certain periods where certain stars we see and we don't see. And in the area of Egypt, which is quite close to where I live in Jerusalem area, this star Sirius has a certain time when it's not appearing, and then it appears again. But how it appears again? It appears again at the end of the night, before sunrise, and of course each day it's a bit different and so on, but we are talking about the moment or this day where we see it again for the first time before sunrise. Okay, and you see it's somewhere in the east, because you see here in this, somebody did this illustration. Even he says he went back to 3000 BC and did this calculation that you have a sunrise here coming, and since Sirius is one of the brightest stars we have, and by the way, Venus is a planet, which is also very bright, but Sirius is a star, you can still see it quite good, and then comes the sun and you can't see it. So the first day where, like we think that the priest will watch in that time each night and check and wait and look, and the first day they see a little Sirius over the horizon before the sun comes up, that's the new year. And that's the day where the Nile starts to come back and flood. Okay, also here you see, at the other picture, you see this bright Sirius. Okay, so this is somebody in the United States that did this, so it's not connected to the astronomical situation we have in Egypt, but just I wanted to show it for getting the feeling of how magical and nice this thing is. So this little arrow, this little line here is not the star, it's a line he did for Sirius, but this here, this little dot is Sirius. So you see the morning dawn is coming up and you see it, and then here he writes 46 minutes before sunrise, and this is a special moment. So that's what they mean by heliacal rise. And I just want to emphasize that Sirius and Orion, okay, or Sopdet and Sa, are the most important constellations in ancient Egypt. You see, these two academics here did this work about the constellation of ancient Egypt, and they have a list about all the constellations and edifications and so on, and they start with these two. This is a very long list, and these are the most prominent ones. Okay, they also try to identify the stars that compose these constellations, okay, because we actually know usually from the Greek constellations, and you see already here, you see the blue ones here, this is Orion in the Greek constellation, like a hunter with his belt, but in red you see the Egyptian constellation as these two scholars here propose them, and you see here Sa with his head and his arms and looking back, and here you see Sirius, okay? So, and here they have also these both in little pictures, and I will not refer to all to any other of their many star constellations they consider and check and so on. Only I want to focus on these two because I think they're very much connected to Pesach and can show us when Pesach actually appears in the night sky. So I just brought in here this picture of Sa, so you can see how more or less it might fit. And you see already these two big stars above. They can also be these other two big stars of Orion or some symbol of it. Okay, because you know Orion, it's one thing most people can recognize in the night sky. It's very prominent to see this three very bright stars in a line. Then you have this X, around, and you have, which is sometimes harder to see, this little other three or more stars that have this more little line, which I told you I would see it as the beard. And here again I do my little trick with Osiris. So you see, this is what I suppose the Egyptians saw when they saw this. Okay, so now let's go to Pesach, because you can talk for hours about this Egyptian constellations and so on. They had a lot of time to think about it and refer to it. So here we have our so-called Orion and Sirius. And this is the original picture I took. The right Orion the Hunted, Orion Bald. Of course, we are not referring to that. It's a completely different situation. So I put in here Osiris-Isis. I put in this booking bag with the beard, you see, and Isis. So what's the issue about it? So first, we heard before that she's following him and protecting him from Psed, and they have some union to receive a child, which is another bright star, or Venus or Horus, which is the morning sun. So in the story, you can more or less see the Egyptian story again of trying to get pregnant, to continue to create the firstborn son, so that the father or that Osiris can continue in the afterlife and his offspring in this life. So if you would imagine now this situation with the hierarchical rise of Isis, it's also a kind of situation where she succeeds to get pregnant from Osiris, and the new sun in the morning is the triumph of the continuation, is the young Horus, his son, as I tried to explain about the leaven, the round bread in the morning is the continuation of Osiris in this world, and he can thus be in the afterworld and get his connection with his firstborn son here and continue. And actually it's the same situation, and we have this ritual of resurrection, death and resurrection. So why but death? Because if Osiris is here in the stars, actually he is dead. Okay, but if Isis succeeds, this bright star, to get pregnant and then get the son, it's still here. Horus is still here. It's living in our day and so on. And Osiris is there at the sky in the next world, in the Duat. And additional point in this is that actually Osiris is somehow the king of the netherworld, the king of the next world, or the underworld, or how you want to call it. And he took also an epithet, a name from another very ancient Egyptian god, which is called something like Khenti Imentu. And his name actually means the foremost of the Westerners, or the foremost of the Westerners. So what does this mean? It's like it's a nice way to say the boss of the dead, or something like that. Yeah, the foremost of deaders, because they try to avoid to say this dead or deceased. They call it in a nice way the Westerners, because in the West is death. In the West, the sun goes down and we bury our people in the West. As you know this more or less, that the necropolises were on the western bank of the Nile and the cities on the eastern bank of the Nile. It's not always in all periods and so on correct. And also the Nile changed its way sometimes, but more or less everything west is meaning death or meaning afterlife. So, but not only the sun goes down in the west, actually all the stars go down in the west, because our Earth rotates in this way that we see all the stars going down in the west. But that is here my point now, what I think happens in Pesach, that when something goes down in the west, is set, okay, it's a death. It's like if the sun sets, it's a death of Ram. But if a star sets, like if Orion sets, if Sa or Osiris sets, it's also a negative point. It's a death of Osiris. So, and then the interesting thing is that Osiris sets in our area very, very exactly in the west. I mean, not left, right, and so on, exactly in the west he sets. And I told you last time about this special hour of midnight in Passover, this very critical, very sensitive hour where the new creation, the continuation, the newborn, the new birth can start. The first little beginning of a new hope or a new life can start there, while at the same time it's the maximum depression of the death from the death from the time before. And if something happens at this time, it's the most dangerous. It can at the same time complete the death completely and prevent the very, very weak and small newborn birth. So midnight, again, when we already had in the Living ritual the time where we took the most precaution that to stop this ritual and stop this reborn or this imagined rebirth cycle of Osiris and Isis and Horus. So in my thinking here, or taking it to the stars, the theory would mean if Osiris, okay, these stars will set in the west, exactly in the west, exactly at midnight, which of course, you know, each day it changes. Each day it gets to another time. At this time, I would expect it to be Pesach, okay? At the day where at midnight, Osiris goes down in the west. And that is exactly when Pesach happens. Okay, this is, sorry for this not so good quality, but I'm using also an app where I follow the stars. And here you can see we are now in the holidays of Pesach, but some days ago, and at the 5th, actually, we had the 5th of April, we had Passover night. And of course, take into account that Jerusalem is not Egypt in the geographical coordinates. Take into account that some 1,000 years went by when this more or less was more or less fixed to define it, and so on. But you see here, this is the constellation of the Greek Orion. So here you have the 3 stars of the head of Osiris or Sa, and this is west. You see this little marker, this is west in the Jerusalem area where I'm now. And here you see that here it's 11. Each day changes a bit. It's completely here in the west at midnight. It's not exactly midnight, you're right, but I say it's happened, it changed a bit, but it's very, very close. These 3 issues, the 3 points, these 3 stars in the west going down at midnight at Pesach, okay? And you could also say that people back then knew when this situation more or less is there, and you have a new moon, and then you count this 14 days from the new moon, that is the most closer to this situation, then we have Passover. Okay, here I also try to show you Sirius, that it goes down a bit after it. Okay, the Orion goes a bit before. Okay, so that's more or less it. And the nice thing is, since I thought about this, and I'm quite convinced that it is actually very much connected, because it's not, you know, many people do a lot of interesting and nice and sometimes not so academically based things about stars and Egypt and so on, but we know, I just recap it, we know for sure that ancient Egyptians referred to these stars as Sa, connected this to Osiris. We know that are these stars, we know that they have connected to these stars and Sirius by themselves, a definition of New Year and renewal, and they are connected to birth and rebirth, to Isis, to Osiris. This is for sure, and I did not make this up. So we know also that going down and setting means something negatively like this, setting sun, the setting star. We know that Osiris going down would be something negative. And we know when Pesach is. So my suggestion is that's not a coincidence, but that, and the nice thing is, when I'm going at the months before Pesach with my dog, usually I go in the evening around 10 o'clock or something like that, so 11 o'clock. And each evening I'm looking for, even if you don't look, it's so prominent, this X with the 3 stars here, and you see it. And you see it more in the south or west and so on, and then slowly it gets closer and closer to the west at this evening time. And if I see it that it's already here in this area around 11 o'clock and so on, or 10 o'clock, I know very, very much, I feel each day that Pesach comes nearer, because I know when this one is here at midnight, that's Pesach. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this one about the stars and Passover. See you next time.